section. We're now moving on to the second theme. And the second theme is around 5G and cloud edge. What's the opportunity and how to embrace it? We have a question that will be running throughout this whole session. So please find some time to give your preferred answer. I'd now like to hand over to Dalia. Dalia Adib is Principal Consultant and Practice Lead for Edge Computing within STL Partners. So Dalia, over to you.
Thanks, Mark, and really looking forward to the session today. As you were saying, we're going to be discussing 5G and the edge compute space, and really focusing on understanding business models and how telecoms operators are going to scale this opportunity. So I'd like to allow my panelists to introduce themselves. Domenico, it'd be great if you could kick off and give us a bit of a preview as well of things like what your organization is doing in edge as well. Oh, Domenico, I think, yeah.
Going out of mute, yes. Dalia. So Domenico here. I'm Vice President in Hewlett-Packard Enterprise for the product management of the telco software. Of course, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise has a strong focus on the edge, but traditionally on the infrastructure needed to make the edge happening. But now raising our focus even towards facilitating developers on moving their workloads on the edge and on the ability to automate operation to have to give a better experience to the final customer. So this is a bit what I'm going to share even more in details in the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Great. Kim, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so my name is Kim Larsen. I'm CTIO here in the Netherlands, T-Mobile Netherlands. And it should not come as a surprise, but Netherlands is a fairly small country. So while we are looking at edge compute and certainly also edge cloud, it is from a distribution perspective less of a relevance if you look at the typical timescales that we are interested in here. But of course, in terms of business opportunities, IoT, smart cities is something that we absolutely are exploring.
Great, and I'll be interested to hear a bit more about some of those use cases. And then last but not least, Lester, it'd be great for a quick intro from yourself.
Hi there, yeah, my name's Lester Thomas. I'm the Chief IT Systems Architect for the Vodafone Group. So I'm responsible for the IT strategy, and really for edge, it's like, how do we package and sell edge compute services? And really within that, we're looking to how do we build like a developer ecosystem and a developer experience for how people innovate on top of our edge services.
Great, thanks, Lester. And maybe so what I wanted to do to start things off is, before we deep dive into things like business models and the technology, is just, I guess, for the audience to paint a bit of a picture of where we are when it comes to edge computing, where we are on the adoption curve. And then I don't know, Lester, if you want to start us off from your understanding, where are we in terms of especially the underlying technologies, whether it's things that you're looking at in terms of tools that developers use, or broadly speaking, technologies that need to be there to enable edge compute infrastructure, to enable the applications. What technologies are more mature, which ones are yet to mature at the moment?
Yeah, we've been deploying edge compute as part of our strategy for a while. We have two example uses that are available today. So in our core network in local technology centers, so it's not right at the edge of our network, but in local technology centers. You're talking about really like a 10 millisecond latency from the end user of the compute, and we're doing that in partnership with AWS, and also we're doing it as part of our mobile private network strategy. So where we're deploying mobile private networks into factories or warehouses, we're also deploying edge compute as part of that as well. So we have use cases which are live today. It's fairly early in the deployment, and really we're looking to how do we build the capabilities so others can come and innovate on top of these services. And one example I'll give you, so if you search for the Edge Innovation Program, so we've got an open invitation for developers to come, and there's a whole load of training an insight in how you can get access to a sort of edge computing on Vodafone, and really is how do we get developers to come and be early, pilots of using edge compute on our network. And this is available in the UK and Germany, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, and you mentioned use cases. Are there any particular use cases that seem most mature at this stage right now?
Like there's a whole range of different use cases, and we think almost like for it to become successful, you need to take a platform view and make the services available for people to build lots of different use cases. And I talked about like the 5G private network. Really, the first use case of that is automation. Basically controlling robots within warehouses or within factories, which is a massive, there's a massive opportunity to drive automation, drive time to market for those warehouses and factories by effectively having like a 5G network is the first deployment of a true 5G network. But you also can then have software running effectively co-located with that 5G core network in the the mobile private network. So that's a very strong use case. But we see on the the use cases in our local technology centres, there's lots of positive use cases, lots of things around digital twins. So can you offload compute from the end user device and effectively create a digital twin in the network? It's things like machine learning, video analytics. It's those sorts of use cases we're seeing.
Yep. And Kim, again, you mentioned a few areas, IoT, I think smart cities. How has it been in terms of evaluating edge use cases for you, particularly given your market in the Netherlands? We talk about low latency a lot. I think in a fairly small country like the Netherlands, your latency is already quite low. So how has that process been for you, and how do you feel that maybe some of the use cases you're looking at might differ than in other markets?
Yeah, I think typically when we think about edge, we think about a sort of small compute data centers that is off the bigger computing centers, right? That's in general in Netherlands. That's no really need for that if you look at the size of the Netherlands, and indeed the latency here is pretty good. So I think for us in general, it's fairly early days when it comes to real edge deployment, edge compute deployment, irrespective of where you situate the hardware that would define your edge. So we have several, I think, pretty interesting programs. So I'm part of a forum in Zuid-Holland, which is a province I'm from here in Netherlands, where we look together with our field labs how to help and support young entrepreneurs with great ideas, particularly in the IoT domain and also on let's say smart cities. So as it is Netherlands and people are born with their bikes pretty much, what we do here is cool collaboration in Amsterdam and other cities where we in Hague, where we actually, the bikes have an IoT device, so you can jump on a bike and you can drive, or a scooter, you can jump on a scooter and drive around. But at the same time, we also measure the air quality. And so it's a combination of the business model, or the municipality basically providing tourists with bikes, or the inhabitants with free bikes. At the same time, also getting an appreciation of the air quality in that city. Do we need edge for that in Netherlands? No, we do not necessarily need edge, right? Because again, we talk about fairly small country. So a lot, I think Lester alluded to that too, a lot of really cool innovation around the IoT and being smart about how to provide IoT, try to make it as easy as possible to implement IoT solutions. Because I think that has been a bit of a barrier so far, that when you have to talk to a young entrepreneur with some great ideas, how do you actually get it to work? So a lot of our focus has been to get this whole chain, end-to-end service chain, to actually work. And we're quite convinced as it becomes more advanced and the scale up, there we do believe that the edge compute will certainly also have let's say a mission to help out with there, although maybe less than it would be in a larger footprint.
That's interesting. I really like that bicycle use case, because it's quite local in nature and lends itself to maybe a telecoms operator being an ICT solution provider as a kind of a local company. Kim, before you kind of move in, I wanted to actually ask you a question. I don't know if this is something that you're looking at, but we do have a question from the audience around autonomous driving, and just because you mentioned smart cities. So do you have any particular views on autonomous driving in terms of IoT and edge computing? Is that a use case you're looking at? Is it, you know, quite a few years out, so it's not really on the radar at the moment? What's your views on it?
Yeah, I think when you look at autonomous driving, and particularly, in Netherlands, I would say the simple answer to that is not something that is big on our radar screen at the moment. In my past with Deutsche Telekom, of course, we looked at this, and we also had several programs on this particular. The problem you have there, the challenge you have there, is that you would like the cars to communicate together. And that becomes immediately a bit of a challenge, because that means if you're driving a Vodafone car, it needs to basically communicate with a T-Mobile car that might need to communicate with a KPN car if you're in the Netherlands, by the way, or something else, right? So this kind of ubiquity between networks is really a requirement if you want to have network-assisted autonomous driving. But I think the networking part of this is the easiest part. I think there's a lot of machine learning AI stuff around the autonomous driving that is possibly making such an idea far out. And you need to be pretty sure that you do have coverage, right? Because once you go out of a coverage area, you of course have to get let's say, either the car takes over in principle, you don't have network assist any longer, or the driver has to take over. So I think in Netherlands, I think we are quite far out of that, unless you have a Tesla and drives on the highway. Still, you should probably be at the driver's seat also.
Yeah, probably better to be safe than sorry. Domenico, so, you know, we've had a few use cases. Kim's brought up this interesting point around almost like edge interoperability. How do devices on different networks, on different network edges talk to one another? Is that something you see as a challenge that is solvable in the near future? Sorry, and what does the industry have to do to enable that ecosystem?
First, if I can just a bit elaborate more on the question related to autonomous driving, right? If I'm allowed to do that, because of course it's very nice to discuss about this futuristic application, but before to get there, just looking at the experience of a driver, there is a lot that can be done, just leveraging the information that a number of sensors can make available in real time before to get at the autonomous drive, right? So at the end of the day, we should not look just at the best or the most innovative technology solution for the future, but we should really look at what makes the experience of the end user better, right? So if the end user is a driver, there is a lot more that can be done in terms of simplifying the research of a parking, or you know, notifying about the best route to get to the destination, etc., in a more intelligent way. Maybe I'm so sensitive about that because I'm living in Rome, that is not clearly the city with the less traffic and with more parking lots in the world. But really, sometimes we always think about you know, the future technology. That is normal because we are engineers, but we should not forget about the customer experience and what makes the life of the people better, right? So now, connecting back to your question. So, I mean, the edge is interesting because the edge has a lot to do with the ability of crunching data and information really close to where they are generated, right? And this may happen through very different networks and very different technology as well. But the fundamental point is to bring this ability for very specific use case to the reality, and at the same time, especially for this industry, it's about not focusing just on the networking or on the connectivity aspect, but going a bit beyond that because what is needed there is to provide, again, the full solution and the full experience to the end customer. We know very well that the end customers can be very different. So we have use cases that are really touching the consumers, other use cases that are touching more the enterprise segment of the market. But if you look at each of them, there is a common argument across the board, and the common argument is that this industry cannot think anymore just in terms of connectivity and just in terms of network, right? Has to think and talk to the end customers about completely new solutions, and that has to be the main focus.
Mm-hmm. And like, you know, to your point, the customers that are going to consume edge computing services are going to range. Lester, you mentioned about developers as being, I would say, a fairly new customer base for telecoms operators. It's not a traditional B2B customer. And I know you spoke about some of the work you've been doing through forums and other things to change maybe even your business models and how you engage them. I wonder if you can elaborate on that. And we have a specific question from the audience around edge and automation, some work that's been happening within the TM forum around MEC APIs, you know, whether you've been involved in that and how you've been involved and how that will, you know, help to solve some of these challenges around engaging and also providing solutions to developers.
Yeah, when I think about the developer ecosystems, I really think there's two types of ecosystems that will form. Effectively, if you look at the use cases, some of the use cases are really coming from the cloud world and then moving to the edge. And some of the use cases are actually today might be more telco. They might be IoT use cases where adding edge compute is an additional service into sort of a telco connectivity centric service. So I think we will end up with sort of developer ecosystems in those two different spaces. So like if I'm a developer building some game today, I might have it deployed in AWS. The ability for me to deploy at the edge of their network, and we're doing a partnership with AWS to have edge sites in our network to give that sort of that gaming experience, to have much more control over the latency. But clearly from a developer experience, you're in the AWS ecosystem, or choose your public cloud, you know, a favorite ecosystem, and it's running on our network, but you're not really interacting with Vodafone per se. In the other hand, if you take a more of a telco or connectivity centric solution, it's like, how do I add edge compute into a suite or a service chain of other telco services? This is where we've really been focused. And both the two previous panelists mentioned about standards, and we need to have standards above just the actual network standards. We've been great as an industry in developing 3G, 4G, 5G as network standards. We need to take these standards up a level, and that's what we've been doing, is how do I make sort of an edge compute service available in a more of a commercial product catalog or a service catalog that's a standard across the different telcos. You can then build a sort of a telco developer ecosystem. And this edge and automation catalyst, we did a catalyst proof of concept project with the TM Forum late last year, was looking at that. We were building sort of a real scenario, and the scenario was basically saying, how do I have edge compute as part of the network as a service API suite? So there's a TM Forum standard. It's part of the Open API initiative, which they call Network as a Service API suite. And today it has a catalog of different sort of networking services. And we looked, could we add sort of edge compute service into that? And we want to also do it in collaboration with the Etsy MECs. They've done a really nice job of describing some of the other sort of radio interfaces you could get access to as part of an edge site. So clearly you're developing, you know, services to deploy at the edge. Typically, these are ones which need greater control. There might be mission critical applications. And it's not just the ability to deploy software at the edge. You can actually, through APIs, integrate with the network to understand, you know, not treat the network as a best endeavors network, but to really understand the performance of the network, the sort of the end-to-end experience of the customer. And Etsy MEC have defined some really nice APIs to do that. So we're building on that and saying, could we use that to then describe an edge compute service in this NAS service catalog, and we built a real use case of of using edge compute, using those services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, really interesting project. And I guess, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of innovation happening in enabling those services and making them somewhat seamless, interoperable, like you said, going further up the stack, not just looking at connectivity. Maybe playing a bit devil's advocate, but one of the challenges, we've seen over the years around telecoms operators moving up the value chain is perhaps not creating interfaces or platforms for customers that are easy to use, right? And that's what cloud providers like AWS and Azure and others do very well. So is that part of the initiative of the project? I know that telcos have been working on things like their customer engagement platforms for a long time now and improving that interface. Are there learnings in other areas or domains within telco that should be considered and brought in into the edge compute space as well? Kim, I'm not sure if you've got a particular view on this.
I mean, my view has always been a bit, I guess, cynical, but I guess I'm older, so I own it. I mean, we shouldn't forget, why are we now in this situation where we need edge compute? It's not necessarily because there's a lot of fantastic, high profitable service to sell to the customer, but it's because we managed to define a new access standard that does require and allow to these very low latencies. And also part of the fundamental architecture of the 5G network, particularly with front hauling becoming quite prevalent, does require you to have edge compute, or have at least a way to deal with your baseband functionality and many of the new functions we define in 5G to actually provide let's say the specifications for the standard. Now, if you are in a small country like us, we probably don't need to distribute very much. And we get away with that at a decent economics. If you are in a big footprint, you might have to do this quite aggressively compared to even what you did in 4G, which were less distributed in nature. So I think there are many other ways of solving this particular, let's say, latency issue on. And I think now it's a bit, yeah, well, let's get some other things going that might, let's say, further justify building all these edge locations in order to get the super low latencies. But I think we shouldn't forget that there might be a lot of other ways to actually solve that particular problem of low latency. So I think there are some very, very interesting, let's say, benefits you get out of distributed architecture in a very big geographical footprint, of course, no doubt about it. Also, when it comes to let's say the way you segregate compute, and maybe possibly also for security, some security benefits of this. If you keep it inside your network, you're not going outside to a public cloud, for example, you might have better security than otherwise. But yeah, I think given 5G drives you towards this, and we clearly see that we might have quite some compute overhead in these edge centers, why don't we just build some additional functionality on top and offer that to our customers? Or allowing, let's say, other enterprise to come in and utilize part of this resource. But from an economics perspective, I still think that there could have been better ways of doing this, but alas, not where we are.
Yeah, no, interesting, Kim. Kind of taking us away there, but no, I mean, I see your point, and I think it highlights the differences that not every edge is not the same in each market. And
Correct.
Someone actually asked a question around, is edge for Europe even real? So is it a real issue because the physical distances are so
architecturally, of course, you have it, right? I mean, if you look at the typical 5G architecture, you have certain planes, a certain, let's say, path of that 5G architecture from the access all the way to the core that you can define as an edge. But if you look at it in terms of physical separation from what you would define as an edge in one geography to what you might do, for example, in Netherlands or Luxembourg for that matter, which is even smaller, then yeah, it's more semantics.
Mm-hmm. I guess regardless of what the edge looks like, how it operates, where it is, it's to make the business model work, there needs to be some level of automation, right? And then I guess that was Lester's point around the APIs, using these sort of cloud native technologies to allow for scale, no matter how much the service needs to scale. I just
But you
actually
can
want to
have
use
all that without edge, right?
Yeah, this is true. This is true. And that's a tangential technology.
Right.
It's a parallel technology,
Yeah.
right? That's not about hosting the application close.
Right.
But I was just sort of manufacturing a segue to our poll. I just wanted to highlight that there is a poll going on the event platform. I think the question is, what should be the operator's automation focus to deliver and guarantee performance of edge-based 5G services? So it'd be great to see people's views on that particular poll. But yeah, I mean, Domenico, going back to you, one area we've maybe neglected, and to Kim's point, there's lots of moving parts here. There's lots of technologies, even though edge is in some ways becoming a catalyst to discuss and to invest in these other technologies. There's other things going on, and obviously 5G is one of them, right? And I think all of you mentioned private 5G as an opportunity. How do you see that sort of playing a role? Is the private 5G side quite distinct from the 5G and edge, the edge compute sites of the network? Are the use cases quite different? What are you seeing in that space?
But what I think is that private mobile network can be an accelerator for the edge adoption, as long again as the telco, as the industry is able to build more value on top at the mobile private connectivity. This is giving an opportunity exactly in the same way as then slicing in standalone 5G will offer as well. The point is what has been discussed earlier, right? So I mean, the point is really to provide value, especially to the enterprises, and the value goes beyond the connectivity. So working at a stack of solution that is able to solve their business problem, that is helping them to digitalize and transform more their production or their operation, for example, is the real key. So because again, the first implementation of private mobile network that we have are pretty much on the manufacturing side, and to improve the efficiency of the IoT. This is a typical case where so we have a networking technology, but on top of them, the enterprise is finally looking at streamlining their production processes, is looking at digitalize more, is looking at creating more efficiency into their distributed sites. So I will not consume all the time just thinking at how to decrease by a couple of milliseconds the latency, even because there may be different options to gain that. The point is really for the industry to package the solution. And then again, what you said before, the concept of automating and having as much as possible things that are software defined or tasks that are executed by software is key here, because it is where you get the ability to scale and to provide solution to as many customers as possible.
Mm-hmm. But even that private 5G opportunity is, arguably can be quite challenging for a telecoms operator, because here we're talking about solutions that combine the application with the networking, which needs to be probably of an industrial standard. If we're talking about manufacturing, it may be replacing industrial fixed networks, for example, if you're talking about robotics. Then you have the sort of edge cloud management, the orchestration, all these partnerships that have to kind of come into place. Is there an obvious starting point for a telecoms operator, or do they kind of have to do it all from the beginning? Otherwise, you don't really capture the opportunity.
As I say, you need to have as much automation as possible in place, especially if you are going to serve the enterprise customers, because this will give you the opportunity to reduce the number of humans that will be assigned to operate each of the customers. And again, the repeatability of the service is not secured up front, right? It's not like selling each and every time just you know, a mobile private network, etc. If you go up in the stack and you start looking at the workload and you start looking at the business outcomes that the full stack is providing, then you need automation. Otherwise, the cost of operating are becoming not sustainable.
Great. Well, I think that's good timing, because that brings us to the end of the panel. So thanks so much, guys, for taking the time to cover quite a lot in 30 minutes. And hopefully we'll get to do this again in person soon.
Thank you so much, Dalia. Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Yes.